Welcome again to our frequent podcast called Wear Many Hats, inspired by Ethan Hawkey. Throughout the year, I, David Punter, the Business Development Director for Hawkey Cleaning and Support Services, shall be interviewing prominent facilities management and procurement subject matter experts across a range of market sectors. It's these people with their wealth of knowledge and their experience that we hope will inspire the next generation of young professionals. Our objective is to share our guest stories and experiences to help motivate, engage, and inspire others into the industry. Through Wear Many Hats podcast, we hope our listeners will gain new perspectives, insights, and learn about strategies to develop their careers in the FM procurement business. It gives me great pleasure to introduce
Don Bowman
from
London University's Purchasing Consortium.
Thank you, Don, for joining us today. Don, without further ado, I just wanted to, for some of our listeners, so they can understand a little bit about what the London University's Purchasing Consortium is all about, because it won't necessarily be familiar to a lot of our listeners. So if you could give me a bit of an idea.
London University's Purchasing Consortium started over 50 years ago in the University of London, and they wanted to start doing some collaborative buying with other organisations, and it started with paper. So the first thing they were buying were pallets of paper, and it developed from there and moved into IT, FM, lab eventually, library services. It's now part of a national group called UK Universities Purchasing Consortium. There are 6 regional consortia, and then there's another one called TUCO, who do the catering, and Tech, who buy energy in the sector. And we work together then for all the unis in the country. To deliver anything that a university needs. When you think of the amount of students, the university I worked at had 20,000 students, 6,000 of them on campus.
Right.
That's a lot of buying that's needed. And equally, 5,000 staff as well, that needed, whether it be catered for, the offices, the FM, the cleaning, just everything you can think of that you need in a large organisation.
Okay. And now, is it just limited to universities?
No, it goes far beyond that. More than half of our members are actually not universities. We have all the major museums and galleries in London, people like the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum. We have gone even further than that. We've got people like the Met Office, the weather people. We've got the Bank of England, National Blood Transfusion Service, London Ambulance Service. It's for the wider public sector, so it's for any public authority.
So they would reach out to you as a support arm for their purchasing needs?
Yeah, absolutely. We primarily put the frameworks in place for the commodities that are regularly used. So one of the biggest ones we do is called the National Desktop and Notebook. That's for laptops, desktops. There are many other ICT frameworks. We have nationally over 100 different frameworks. That deliver the major items that universities need. Now, none of them are compelled to use any of them. It's not always best necessarily to use a framework if you've got good local suppliers.
Right.
Haven't had that don't have the national reach or don't have the reach of a regional lot, then it's quite often that you're better off going local as well. So there's no one compelled to use them out of our membership, but we do pick up about 40% of our overall members' spend, non-pay spend through frameworks. As an average, some more.
That's very interesting. And so would they pay to be on that framework then?
They pay an annual membership. And then we get paid by what's called
through the sale process.
Yeah, there's a small percentage of the sale that the supplier then pays us retrospectively.
Great. That's it's very interesting to know how it sort of evolved and stuff, which really moves me on to a little bit about how Don evolved in terms of your journey and how you entered the career into procurement. Can you give us the listeners a little bit of an idea of how you started off in your career?
Yeah, it was my career started a long time ago. At the age of 16, I wasn't particularly academic. I went to a grammar school, but I wasn't anywhere near successful there. So I was quite keen to get out and get working. First job, went to work for the civil service, passed the civil service exam, and started as what's called a local officer for the DHSS in Deptford, which I'm sure you're aware is an interesting area to start your career.
Challenging.
Yeah, Deptford, New Cross, very interesting areas. From there, I did a number of other jobs, I would call them. I've never quite worked out what I wanted to do, and worked in catering on the railways for a while, as a manager of a catering outlet. I worked in a bakery where I was running sections of one of the large ones, one of the big...
I won't make a railway joke then about the catering, because you probably heard them.
Yeah. I mean, they were so bad. They're long gone now, the company I work for. So from there, I kind of realised, it twigged that I'm not really going to get anywhere unless I get back into office work. So I went back to working in the civil service. Actually went to the Ministry of Agriculture.
Okay.
A grade below where I'd started 15 years before. So I was back to square minus one, just to get my office skills up, because from the time I left school till that time, I think it was Word for Windows, I think it was called then, had come in. Some of the earlier stuff had started, and I had no experience in that area. So I knew I had to go back to pick up those skills. Spent about a year there, and then ended up working for a broadcasting company, broadcast sales. So in a general kind of administration role, and I worked for them in the finance department.
And that was London-based?
Yeah, that was in near Borough Station, round that way. And I ended up helping out with a stock take one day, helping out the purchasing manager, as was. And she was quite keen that I spent more time working with her. So I ended up doing a few small procurements for her. And then she really encouraged me. She was the best kind of person for my career that I've ever met.
So kind of a mentor.
Absolutely, yeah. She was superb and convinced me to start studying SIPs, which I did at night classes at Croydon College a couple of nights a week.
Which is the purchasing procurement.
The Chartered Institute of Purchasing Supply.
That's right.
Yeah. So you do up to, it's a postgrad diploma that you get at the end of it after a few years. Then when she moved on I think she went to work for Sainsbury's, I took over that role. And then I realised I was almost fully qualified, and I wanted to set out on my own. And the first procurement job that I actually got off my own bat was at the House of Lords.
That's pretty impressive.
It was an interesting place, an amazing place to work. Yeah. It was,
and you were there for about 7 years, I was.
It was probably too long in the end, but it was just such an amazing place to work. I didn't want to leave, but eventually you want to move up a bit and move on in your career. And I had young kids at the time, so I ended up working for the Skills Funding Agency, who do the apprenticeships, and the government department that pays for apprenticeships and that, and did some huge procurements for them. And then from there, went into the HE sector. I was the head of procurement at the University of Kent. And then once in the HE sector, I've now stayed there, and I think I've been there for about 13 years now.
So a very impressive track record of public sector, but sort of bridging a lot on the higher education side as well.
Yeah, most recently.
Which is, and it's interesting because our last podcast that we did, the gentleman Gareth Davis there mentioned about doing the Chartered Institute course that you did and went down that route. So what is it like in terms of what is it you like about your procurement role now?
The key things about procurement that I enjoyed, I would say, were have the people side of it. So whether that be internal stakeholders, meeting with internal stakeholders in a large organisation, or the negotiating was something I really enjoyed with the sales guys.
Okay, so you do a hard bargain.
Well, yeah, I learned quite a bit when I worked for the broadcasting company because they were a broadcasting sales company.
Okay.
So, and I spent a lot of time supporting the sales teams as well. So I built, picked up a few bits from the guys there about the usual things about hooks and getting to know people and building relationships. And it is all about people skills.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And so we've talked about the industries that your company currently work with and things like that. So I won't ask that particular question, but which skills are required, do you think, for your job, let's say now?
Now, my role's moved on. I'm now effectively, the role is director.
Right, you are the top of the tree now.
Yeah, so it's effectively the managing director of a small company. So, and unfortunately, I don't get to do a lot of procurement anymore unless it's making decisions on behalf of the company.
Do you miss that?
I do. Yeah, I do miss.
You don't keep your hand in there every so often?
Oh,
Don?
yeah, bits and pieces, and help out with the evaluations if we're a bit short of numbers. And yeah, I do.
So it's that evaluation process and stuff. You don't get your hand in that hard,
more for
negotiation
more
side.
for the company. So next year, for instance, our lease is up, so that'll be interesting.
For the building you're in?
Yeah, the building we're in. We're in Tottenham Court Road, and we.
I know the building. I've been there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
tough landlord to deal with. I should say.
Yeah. So we renegotiated about 4 years ago.
Okay.
Probably at the height of the market. So we know we're in a strong position. We're unlikely to stay there, but that's another. But it will be there'll be some negotiating to be had in that.
Okay, and so obviously. You still keep your hand into some of the old things that you were doing and stuff, but now being at the top of the tree, you have an overarching looking at all the other people within your organisation.
Yeah, but I do need to keep on top of
absolutely
the latest. So yeah, supply management, or whether it be through keeping my procurement skills up to date, keeping over. There's some big changes. Well, they're not that big really, but there are some changes.
We can talk about them.
Yeah, there are some changes coming that I need to keep on top of as well.
Okay, so for Don now, what does a sort of a typical day look like? If you can say there's a typical day.
You mean at work or the total?
Let's go from the time you open your eyes to have the first coffee.
Yeah, the time I open my eyes, I drink a lot of coffee in the day. A typical day will be starting with a walk. I generally walk my partner down she works at a local school. So I walk down with her and walk myself back. We don't have a dog. It's one of the things should I get a dog? Get me out more. Never got round to doing that. But yeah, I like to get out for a walk first thing if I can, and which I repeat at the end of the day as well. But it's an endless round of meetings, if I'm honest, most of the time. Yeah, most of our team now, we only work in the office 1 day a week.
Is that the same for you?
Yeah, that is the same for me. Yeah, unless I'm coming into London to meet members or for meetings or conferences or travelling, it's generally we make sure we're all in the office together for 1 day a week.
Okay.
The rest of the week is generally
back-to-back Teams calls.
Back-to-back Teams calls, which can be 10 or 12 a day sometimes.
Do you like that?
Yeah, sometimes, not always. Yeah, I don't miss the commute.
Okay.
Because I was...
Because you're based in Kent?
I am, yeah. I'm quite down near the Kent coast, and it's almost 2 hours door to door. So even though it's a so-called high-speed line, it's only high speed when it gets near London, so it's a bit of a misnomer. So yeah, it probably takes me 2 hours door to door. So I was losing 4. Well, I wasn't losing it. I was working on the train anyway. But it's easier to manage your workload when you're working from home. So that side of it, I think, is better.
Right.
You don't have that dead time of walking to the station, and but trying to keep yourself active is really important. I had a problem with my back in December, and I'm sure part of that was because of sitting bad posture and leaning over your laptop all day and sitting staring at meetings. So yeah, I don't miss the commute. I do miss the social side. I miss meeting everyone and
collaboration.
Yeah, collaboration. And I do worry about when we get new staff in, that we make sure that they're in more than a day a week and we rotate other people to be there with them where possible. Because it's so important when you start a new role that you've got someone, the way it used to be, you'd tap on someone's shoulder. What does this mean? Or what does that mean?
Correct.
You're starting a new job. You don't want to look like you know nothing and keep asking loads of questions via Teams or whatever. So we do try and encourage when we have new staff that people are in with them. So yeah, I miss that interaction, the daily interaction of being in an office. Yeah.
Okay. So what would you say to someone by way of advice if they were starting a career off in procurement?
In procurement in general,
or FM procurement, let's say.
FM procurement. If you're starting in a particular area, such as FM, you're an FM category lead. Then you've got you should understand what it is you're buying.
Yeah.
Understand that category. Now, if you're in a generalist role sometimes in a university, you have lots of it. You cannot learn everything, and you can't pretend to learn everything. And it might be, it's the same to some extent. If you're in a really large organisation, you're probably in a subcategory of FM. It's really important to understand what it is you're buying, to understand what it is that the end user wants from a supplier.
So what sort of advice would you give them to be able to immerse themselves into that?
Talk to people. Always ask people to help. Everyone likes to help new staff, and even though they might seem grumpy sometimes, if you tap them on the shoulder too often, don't be put off by that. They really do want to help you. It's just make sure your timing's good, that you're not interrupting them in the middle of something too often. But ask people. Don't be afraid to ask. None of us know any of this without having asked someone or learnt from someone else.
Been down that route as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a big believer, even though I've been in the profession now for I think about 25 years. I don't know everything. I never will do. When I was at the uni, I was buying all sorts of things. I had no idea what it was. But if you ask someone and you ask them in the right way, when you're buying these hugely expensive and complicated bits of lab equipment, there's just no way you're going to know what an anechoic chamber is or does. That's why these guys are academics in their field. So you need to just ask them in the right way. Ask people that you're the expert. Tweak their ego a little bit. Academics like that. But just say, can you tell me in layman's terms what it is you want from this? What are the key issues with buying this that are going to help me understand what I should be asking of the suppliers? Okay,
that's a very interesting point. Looking specifically at, again, facilities management, has the way, do you think, facilities management procurement changed over the years?
Yeah, it's. I've certainly seen it in the HE sector where it seems to be quite cyclical, where it's outsourced, then it's insourced, then it's outsourced, and that seems to come and go. I know in the HE sector in the last few years, there's been a big push to insource in a lot of the FM side.
Is that when you mean in the higher education sector, insourcing, like, let's say cleaning, for example, it's taken in-house?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are quite a few organisations have taken cleaning in-house. I think there's a realisation now that, and a lot of that isn't necessarily for quality or for cost reason. In fact, it generally costs them more.
Yes,
it's more a push from
I'll say that from a cleaning point of view.
It's become more a push from students and from unions to get the workers onto equivalent terms of the staff that are working within an institution.
Okay, so the drive there is a kind of a one-team approach on
It is, and I
site.
can understand it, having to some extent, having worked in a university. It does allow you to build more of a team spirit. The problem is whether you've got that supply available, which you don't necessarily have if you've got a fixed workforce. When issues happen, how are you going to top that supply up? It's the speed of additional support where needed is quite often the problem.
Yeah,
but yeah, they're generally for other reasons other than quality. There's been a big move to insource.
Okay, that's where we are at the moment. It's being insourced. Are we in the insource part of the cycle? Or is it moving back again?
It's hard to say.
That.
I've seen a few that I haven't heard of anyone else insourcing recently.
Okay,
but I know a couple of years ago there were quite a few of our members that were insourcing at the time.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because obviously I remember being in the soft services, support services industry for about 25 years myself. Is that by insourcing, it does bring back the legacy issues that we tried to get away from when one was outsourcing. So just a word for the listeners there out there. But
you mean the TUPE?
Yeah, the TUPE, the superannuation and various other pension rights.
It does.
And things like that.
The costs
a fortune.
Very significant,
and that's public money.
Yeah, those that have insourced. The public money side isn't. Universities are funded a bit differently. It's the students' loans is the majority funder now.
Okay. So also with the advent of, you talked a lot about working at home and stuff and having back-to-back meetings, but would you say with the advent of online meetings through Zoom and Teams, do you feel that this has affected the way strong partnerships with suppliers can be fostered?
I would say it's a lot harder than it used to be. I know when we've been running events for members in person, it's been quite difficult to get sufficient numbers there to run these events over time. I can't really talk for individual organisations because it depends how they're running themselves.
Okay.
It's not so important for us in that we're putting frameworks in place. So we're kind of an agent.
Slightly at arm's length.
Yes, exactly. Slightly at arm's length. So we got a relationship, obviously, with suppliers.
Correct.
But the key relationship is the supplier to the buyer within one of our members.
I get you.
So that side of the relationship, I think, is probably more, equally, if not more important for.
Okay, that does answer my question. So, and do you think COVID and the way that we now work has kept suppliers and procurers more at arm's length than before?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. And it's for the reasons I mentioned, that if organisations are not expecting their staff there 5 days or at least 4 days a week, that is going to have an impact. You're not going to meet with your suppliers so often, and from a supplier side, you're not going to meet the key people internally as often as you would have done in the past. You can't just turn up on site and just check everything's working okay and expect to see the stakeholder, your key contact, because you don't know whether they're going to be there, whereas before they'd always be there. Whether they're available might be another matter. But I do. I think that it just makes building relationships that little bit harder if you're seeing people a bit less, I think.
Yes. Okay. I think a couple of other of our podcasters sort of said the same thing. So what is the next big thing in procurement that we, let's say, Hawkey Cleaning and Support Services need to look out for?
The next big thing, well, there's the new, from a public sector point of view, the new regs coming in, which are almost ready to roll out now. That won't happen probably until the mid 24. I would imagine it's certainly spring 24 was the last date I had. And the way these things tend to take a bit longer than anticipated.
So those regulations, are you able to just really summarize
them as when it comes to frameworks, you can now have 8-year frameworks.
Okay.
For instance, as long as you refresh them in the middle, which kind of makes it a bit pointless, to be honest. But that's we're not sure how much use they would be. For instance, if you were on a framework and it was an 8-year one, after 3 years, we'd have to open it up again to outside entrance.
Okay.
And you could either just sit on what you'd produced 3 years ago or resubmit yourself.
Okay.
You're not going to sit on what you did 3 years ago because you'd be concerned about that you might not be there if you just sat on your laurels and things change.
You would expect suppliers to upgrade the information, but would it be open to new suppliers during that process as well?
Yes, it would, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of a dynamic purchasing system. It's kind of a little bit of a crossover.
No.
A dynamic purchasing system is where it's open all the time.
Okay.
It's almost like a framework where everyone can join and it's always open. I mean, they need to be well managed in where it comes to call-offs about how you
Okay, but at the moment your framework is not open to everyone.
They're all fixed 4 years.
Okay.
And then there's no opportunity to join during that 4 years. But the new frameworks of 8 years, if you've got to open it up
every 3
anyway. Well, and everyone is going to resubmit anyway. It's not that much different.
And are there any other things in the new regulations that are?
There's more of a duty to be transparent on your pipelines, which should help the industry a little bit. It depends how diligent you are on. It's likely that there'll be a central portal where everyone has to put the central government.
What's coming up?
In particular, everything that's coming up over the next, it could be over the next 18 months. So there's a minimum as to what tenders you're going to be going out on over that period.
However, because your organisation members don't have to use your organisations, that pipeline may be irrelevant.
Sorry,
your members on it don't have to use you as a framework. That pipeline that they submit of saying I'm going out to tender, for example, is almost irrelevant.
Well, they would have their own. We'd have, as a consortium, we'd have our pipeline of frameworks.
Oh, okay.
They would have their own pipelines then of if they were going out to tender.
Oh, okay.
Now, it's not really that clear, but if you're just intending to call off a framework again, whether you need to put that on the pipeline.
Okay.
Because I wouldn't imagine you have to, because there's no need to advertise beyond the framework suppliers.
Okay, I'm with you.
So I think it's just if you're intending to be going out to a full tender.
Is there any other big things in procurement to look out for?
There's the reporting side of it that's going to change. And responding to suppliers, giving them feedback, how you give feedback. Okay,
very important.
Yeah, it's not necessarily going to be in a good way, though, I think. Some of it seems to be saying it's not quite clear yet, but it seems a little bit confused as to how much feedback you give and to what detail. I don't know what your experience is, but we always give more than we're obliged to. We always do, because it's important for suppliers to know.
Yes, I mean, my experience in public sector certainly has been that there's always been given a very clear scoring and key areas as well. In private sector, it tends to be a bit loose in terms of it's, could be you're a bit too corporate for us, or you're a bit too this, or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's less, it's more subjective.
Yeah,
I would say. Okay, so now moving on, how important, changing the subject quite radically here, how important now are equality, diversity and inclusion issues affecting today's procurement decisions?
I'm not convinced that they affect decisions.
Okay.
In fact, you have to be a bit careful that you're not breaking the law if you did go down that route.
Correct.
But what's become clear is it's critically important that both our staff and our suppliers are aware of the issues. That we train our staff annually on EDI. We all of our procurement staff, myself included, are signed up to the SIP's corporate ethics program. So we do plenty of due diligence ourselves on what we do, and we also do some training for our suppliers to try and make sure that they're aware of their responsibilities. We'll ask the questions at tender stage to make sure our suppliers are aware of the issues and asking what they do to ensure that everything they do meets the requirements. But you do have to be a bit careful legally as to how you go about putting that in a tender.
Yes. How important are sustainability issues with a supplier that you work with?
Yeah, if you'll have been on our website, you'll see that sustainability is massive for us. It always has been. We were the first public body to produce a modern slavery statement, for instance. We've produced training resources for both SIPs and for the HE sector, including some online training we produced. We're involved in another academic research project in that area where we've been asked to contribute to some research on that's both on the business and human rights side as well as on the climate side. Yeah, everything we do, it has that embedded in it. We also follow the global international standard, the ISO 20400.
Right.
Which is the sustainable procurement standard. So everything we do follows that, and we're independently assessed for it. In fact, we've got another one coming up shortly.
So, I mean, you mentioned just briefly about online training. So you, as an organisation, give online training to anyone, or how does that work?
To our members, yeah. Well, what we did on the modern slavery was we did that that was open source. We did that for SIPs. My predecessor, Andy Davis, worked with someone who's on our board, actually, Dr. Olga Martin Ortega, who's an academic in this area, runs a business school at Uni of Greenwich, and they created the resources that for SIPs to use, the profession to use, and for our members to use around modern slavery, the impacts, what you should be looking for in your supply chains, how you should manage the risks and mitigate against.
And that's a service that you offer out to the members?
Yeah, absolutely. We've always offered training to our members, free of charge. Yeah.
Thank you. Now moving on back on to yourself and that, what would you say is your biggest regret in your career to date?
There's probably a couple. One would be probably leaving the House of Lords because I loved working there.
I thought you would say that.
It was just the career.
It's that Strangers Bar, wasn't it?
It was Strangers Bar and all the other bars, and no, it was the interesting tenders. In fact, the best tender ever done was there, which was for fine wines for the restaurants. So,
yes,
things like that, and
I'm sure our listeners will be very intrigued by that.
So it was just a great place to work with some fantastic and interesting people as well. It was a great place to work, but that was a career decision. I knew I needed to do that
to move on. Really,
absolutely, yeah. And the other one would be probably not getting into procurement sooner, because it's something that I feel I'm natural at. It just comes easy to me, and it's something that I do without having to think.
Okay, that's good. And so you would say even in your sort of private life, you are a procurer of things.
I think through and I plan, and I don't jump in. I must say I'm not an impulse buyer. I'll research.
You're the holiday booker.
Yes,
I imagine
exactly,
so. Yeah. So, moving now on to more positive, is that what is your greatest achievement in your career to date?
I think it's probably the fact that I realised I needed to go back to square one to get myself into a career that I wanted. But when I went back to a junior role, when it was what was called an admin assistant within the Ministry of Agriculture, I knew exactly why I was doing it, even though, I was in my 30s and I knew I should have done much better much sooner. But I knew why I was doing it. It was having the faith in yourself to take that step back to get yourself moving forward. I realised, though, the places I'd gone, you'd kind of get to a certain level within an organisation, and it didn't matter how good you were. You hit this ceiling where there were people who were coming in with MBAs and doing all the management roles, and you could never quite break through that. So even though I progressed to a reasonable level, I could just see there was nowhere to go beyond that. And taking that risk, and it was quite a significant pay cut, to do that.
But it was a calculated risk at that time in your life. You were in your 30s, where you could do that.
It had to be done. It was something that, to realise that if I hadn't have done that, I'd never have found the career that I found. I might still be doing jobs. So,
okay. Yeah. And finally, the sort of last question that I'd like to ask is that what things in life, whether it be work or leisure, gives you the greatest satisfaction and enjoyment?
I think getting to there are a few. There's one in the career side of things within LUPC is after a board meeting where I've kind of produced reams of paperwork and it's gone well. I find that immensely satisfying to know we're on the right path, to know that they're happy with the management accounts, they're happy with the direction of our strategy and where we're going. That and also at work is having a team get together or a team away day, and then also you only ever realise that if you do. We do an anonymous staff survey every year.
Okay.
So we're able to judge exactly how we're getting on, what the staff really think of us. And I've always wanted to know that. I've always encouraged 360 reporting. So if you don't, you really don't know how you're getting on, what people think of you, and once you've got a baseline, then you can measure yourself year on year. So there's the satisfaction of knowing that the organisation's doing well, knowing that the staff are doing well, that they're enjoying working there, and then personally, seeing my children grow and progress, and they're both at interesting ages now. So one's heading, coming up for his GCSEs, and the other one's not long started secondary school. So just seeing them change, they change so much.
Maybe a potential procurement specialist in the making.
Well, possibly, but I think they've got their sights set higher, to be honest. They're at that age where
astronauts and things.
In the last few months, I've managed to get 2 of my nephews to start careers in procurement. I've encouraged them to go and to start their SIP study, even though they're not in procurement roles, because I'm aware that there's great opportunities in procurement.
There is
a lot of vacancies out there that we struggle to fill within our sector.
Yeah.
So I've convinced 2 of my nephews, hopefully it'll work out well for them, but they both started SIP studies this year.
Okay, well, I hope that they are new arrivals to be our listeners to our podcast.
Yes, I will encourage them.
Don, that brings us to an end of our 3rd Wear Many Hats podcast. We hope that our listeners found this interesting to listen to, and we'd like to thank you, Don Bowman, for taking the chair today. It has yet again been very thought-provoking and engaging, and we welcome the support and feedback from our listeners. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thanks very much.